Oh, we're live. All right. As Palmer is taking a quick break because he is having technical difficulties, which is normally my problem, but tonight, no, it's Palmer. I've rubbed off on him. It's like, here, I get a new computer, first initial run of it ever being used, and he goes, I think I rubbed off on him.
You've passed your bad luck along, have you? Your bad internet connections or technical issues have been. The buck has been passed. Now it's his turn to suffer.
Yeah, it's he's now living on the International Space Station.
That's it, in low orbit.
Yeah, he's the Wallowitz of the group now.
We'll get to experience the Palmer frozen screensaver mode. Hopefully not too much, fingers crossed, but we might do.
All righty. Well, we got a bunch of people in the house tonight. You know, we got Brad's in here. Dan just popped in here. Well, what have you been up to?
Hobby-wise, I've been messing around with a few bits and pieces. I put up a video there the other day. I managed to get my hands on some older metal Battletech miniatures and blister packs. I found them in sort of like a bargain bin in one of the model shops here. I was really not expecting to find some Battletech stuff here, but I've been going through that stuff, and because I have some of the newer plastics, I've been comparing them a bit. You know what I mean? Looking at the difference in the miniatures, and I've been painting up some vehicles for Battletech. I've mostly been focusing on Battletech at the moment.
Yeah. Looking at getting all ready for the second wave of the
this is it. I keep having to sit on my hands and I'm like, oh, I could buy, you know, because there's like Royal Party UK or Fantasy Welt, which is a German company that sell the Iron Wind metal stuff as well. I keep being tempted to buy more vehicles because I'm really enjoying the vehicles. And then I'm reminding myself, wave 2 of the Kickstarter's coming soon. You know what I mean? I'm going to be a wash with mech. So I need to, you know, not buy anything for the moment.
I just picked up 3 new mechs this week. I got a Berserker, an Owen, and a what the heck was the third one? I can't remember. I can tell you in a second here.
Well, there's so many of them. And like, I don't really know anything that isn't beyond Succession Wars era. And I'm starting to dabble with clan stuff. So like my favorite mech with the clans from playing with them is the Mongrel. I really like using that one, but I don't know any of the like Dark Age or Jihad era stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm just sort of taking my time going through it. I'm still fairly new to Battletech. I've only been messing around with it for a couple of years, but I'm enjoying it. It's really good fun.
It's a Komodo.
A Komodo, that's the other one you got, was it?
I think it's 55 tons. With lots and lots and lots of medium lasers designed for killing off. Yeah, okay. Brad just piped in and said, "You got the Komodo." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I did." It's like...
Here to remind you, was he?
It's like when you have hundreds of them, it's like, oh, what was the one I just got? Yeah. Trying to remember.
Like, I think it's funny, like, there's so many mechs. Like, when I bought a job lot of them, like I was saying, I bought like about 2 stars, maybe a little bit more, maybe 10 mechs, and there's 1 or 2 mechs in it, like in particular I didn't know about beforehand. The Merlin, it's like a 3010 mech, and yeah, so you know, there's some mechs out there that even I'm coming across and I'm like, what is this thing? You know what I mean? But of intentionally doing that, you know what I mean? So when I play against the clans, I still don't know what a lot of their mechs are like, so I still get that surprise moment of how fast did that move? What the hell did it hit me with? You know what I mean? I'm going through that genuine sort of experience of it, and I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. It's good fun.
Oh yeah, it's even I have that problem. It's like we'll go to like Gen Con, you're playing a game, and we're playing like say 3075 era, and they have all mechs from that era, and I'm like, what the heck is that? What is that? What is that? I have no idea.
What's that?
It's like the first time you ever see it or something, you know. It's like you're looking at it. I have no knowledge of this place. You know, I'm like Gandalf in Moria. I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I know a lot of this stuff. So there's so many things that just keep coming out with more and more.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation, and they're still coming out with stuff for the Ill Clan era, aren't they? They're bringing out new mechs and then a lot of variants for
Oh yeah.
current mechs. So there's there's a lot of stuff coming out hot and fast. Like it's pretty good. It's a good time to get into BattleTech, or if you're into BattleTech already, like you're a more veteran player. How are you finding the new sort of era or new releases as such per se?
Well, the new stuff, as I said before, is that I'm not too enamored with the size of everything. To me, they're too bulky, too big. They supersized them. They've been to McDonald's, supersized too much. But I like the look of them. I like how they got lots of detail and everything on them. But I just not so how they're expanded off the base.
Yeah, we were saying before we went live there, like we were talking about the Daishi, and it does have an issue with trying to sort of stay on the base. They are pretty chunky. I agree with you to a certain extent. I think like they could have scaled down the whole thing so they fit onto the base a bit more. But you're gonna have that issue. It's like, well, what's the next stage in evolution? Are we gonna get bigger hexes and bigger hex maps? I think that would be
start playing with 2-inch hexes.
Maybe. I don't know. It's I've been thinking about like designing terrain and stuff, and I'm trying to think of what's the practicalities like of trying to build like a wood hex and stuff like that. You know what I mean? How do you represent a woods on a hex with a mech that goes over the size of its base? So if I want to put like 6 woods together or 7 woods, so say they're in a block, how am I going to get this guy down if they're 3D physical sort of woods? You know what I mean? Because it'll knock 2 or 3 woods over. There's just sort of practical designs I'm trying to think of in regards to the hex. And the mechs being so big kind of doesn't help. But they look cool and I like them. But at the same time, I understand the practicality of it. So have you been up to, Rusty? Don't tell me you've gone into frozen mode as well. Am I the only one carrying the show now? Can you still hear me, folks? I have the comment section brought up. Have your trees removal. That's what I was thinking of, Lord Draconum. I've been trying to think of, when we're talking about hex sizes, I'm trying to think of the practicalities between using the map hex size, which is the base size for the mechs, and then I've been trying to think of what are the practicalities of designing wood so that you'll remove it from the map. And then I've been thinking maybe if you play with bigger hexes, you could have a ring that the mech sits in, so that it'll be you'll have woods around the mech and you'll have like a core piece taken out. But the issue you're going to have there, and it kind of goes away from the design I want, is I want to be able to use the standard maps that we have. I don't want to stop using the maps, and I've bought quite a few of the neoprene maps as well and stuff, and I just want to have 3D stuff on them. So I'm trying to think of how to do wood hexes, the practicality of doing wood hexes, and what way to do it. Are they, am I going to print them onto a base like I kind of do with my building terrain that I've done? I've dabbled a little bit. There's different practicalities of it. It's an interesting concept and a challenge when it comes to terrain. We have a Palmer back. Hey.
Yeah, I don't see Rusty. Is he here?
Oh, I think his connection dropped out.
Oh, are you serious? Oh gosh. So it was my computer, not my connection, and but I'm using my iPhone as a personal hotspot, and I'm totally fine now, as far as I can tell. So like my internet is fine. It's just my computer's Wi-Fi card has apparently got issues. So
no problem. As Dan is saying, it's the Scarnier BattleTech show now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Terrain design and new mechs and scales. It's all good. I'll keep it rolling.
There we go. Sorry, who's on right now? I see that Brad's on. Or Draconum.
We've Lord Draconum. We've Dan Booman. We've Wisey, is it? Or Wisey? Axe, Annex.
Oh, yeah. David Moffat. Yeah.
There's a few of them.
Oh, there's Rusty, and he's got here too. He's back. Excellent. So I'm Mr. Freeze tonight, and then of course I'm contagious, and then Rusty
I'm just
gets knocked off.
I'm confused. How can the guy who's like on a different
The guest.
continent have no issues with connection, but you do, dude?
And-
It's
And this is why we had you here tonight. You're our backup. As everything actually fails on our side, we at least know that you're there.
he's dependable. We'll get him on. He's dependable.
Well, just last week, the entire state lost internet.
Oh, well, I'm using. I was just telling Dwayne, I'm using my iPhone as a personal hotspot for the show because my internet's fine at the house. It's just my computer for some reason. I got to figure it out. There's something wrong with my Wi-Fi card on my computer or something because I actually like my iPhone is fine in my hobby room in the basement, and we're fine right now. But I'm using my iPhone's internet right now, and so yeah, it's just strange. I'm not sure. So where did you guys get to as far as
We've been talking about mechs, and then Rusty disappeared off, and then I talked a little bit about design and terrain. I'm trying to come up with concepts of how to design wooded terrain for BattleTech and how to try and integrate it with the current maps. That's about it. You know what I mean? That's why it was turned into the BattleTech show, but it's grand.
All right. Well, have you finished a bottle of whiskey by talking about BattleTech that much already?
No, I do have that bottle of Jameson IPA edition that I.
Oh, that's nice.
I've been chipping away in it, so I'll have a bash at that.
I like the Guinness version of that. The Guinness version is really nice too. They have a Jameson Guinness that's also just like that. They're really nice, both of those.
I haven't tried the Guinness one. I'll keep an eye out though.
It's really good.
It adds just a hint of Guinness to it.
So I don't recognize the name Wissy, WHSSY in the house. I'm not sure if you have a YouTube channel or if there's another way we'd know you, but thanks for joining the show. Appreciate that. So do you guys want to do, if you haven't already, your sort of what you've been up to and what you're drinking tonight? I know you already, maybe if you haven't already, you already kind of started, Dwayne, by showing us your musty drink.
Oh yeah, I've talked about what hobby I'm up to, musty drink, so it's up to you boys now. I'm well ahead of you.
All right. I'll just introduce what I have to drink, and then we can start trolling. I have Appleton Estates 8-year-old rum.
Nice. Awesome.
So that's what I'm up to right now.
And how about anything you're working on or gaming or anything, Rusty, that you're doing?
Well, we had our BattleTech weekend last Saturday. Ouch. I pinched. So we did that, and the video went out on Monday. Then I haven't really been hobbying much around here myself, other than, I have been. The game right there, the board game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm in 1917 right now. So I've been doing basically a turn a day.
Moving right along, 1917.
Yeah. It was 1914 at one time. So
That's right.
1917.
Pretty soon we'll get to the automobile. No, I guess the automobile was created by then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. They had
cars. Yeah.
What was it, 1904 or something?
Automobile? Or 1890, somewhere in there.
Okay, 1890.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, like you, I'm slowly working on my 2 last heroes for the challenge. There's nothing really to show right now, just the 2 beastmen, the chariot guy. I'm just getting undercoated and base painting. There's nothing really to show, but I kind of, I think I talked with both Rusty and Dwayne about this, but I did get Tabletop Simulator, and one of my friends and I are going to try a game on it. Like, we actually got on there and just messed around with it just to be able to get stuff on the table and move things around. I mean, it took us like an hour and a half, 2 hours just messing around with it, just to kind of look at how we even like put out some Saga miniatures and kind of put our distance markers out to show how we could move pieces and simulated like a round of combat, like just trying to figure it out. It's really not that hard, but it is something that you have to mess with to kind of get, I may be playing a Saga game soon over that, which would be fun. It actually looks like you can play it pretty well. You know, they have like, I like Saga Dark Ages, like the Viking sort of era, and that's my favorite, and that's what they have, and like that's what they started with, and so you have access to all those miniatures, which is very cool. And so I'm looking forward to that. And
Woodford Reserve.
For tonight, I've got my bottle that my huge Costco bottle of Woodford Reserve, and so having some bourbon tonight.
So we got a little. We're representing the. It's like I'm representing the Caribbean. You got the Northeast United States, and well, we got Ireland there.
Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky, I think, isn't it?
No.
Hang on a second here. Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. You telling me that what it says right there is wrong?
Yeah, that's Northeast.
Kentucky's Northeast.
Yeah.
And you're like West Coast.
I'm in the West. I'm in the Midwest.
Yeah, the
Kentucky
Tea Party
like,
happened in Kentucky, right?
Kentucky's East. Or East, actually. That's East.
Okay, we're talking about globally. I get it.
I literally, when it comes to America,
everything's
I know,
Northeast.
Like,
yeah.
New York, LA, and where Texas is. After that, it's like good luck.
Kentucky's Northeast when you're thinking like globally, like North America.
When you look at Kentucky, Kentucky's a really long state. It reaches all the way into the east, and it touches the basically the almost Mississippi, I think.
Yep. So we got. Oh, sorry, Rusty, you were saying?
Nothing.
All right. Just going back, just looking at some of the different comments here. So Wissy says, if you're in UK, I guess it's only lunatics that are using the broadband, whereas peak time in the US.
That's when I was giving you a stick about disappearing off the pair of yous. You know, that's what that's in reference to. And
he says he's new, which welcome aboard. Says that he stumbled on you via the Old Hammer pages, which we do like to do some Old Hammer for sure. And I've got some of that coming up real soon. Little Old Hammer project coming up. And Dan says, hard to beat Annie Jameson. We toured the distillery when we visited Dublin 2 summers ago. Wonderful. That would be awesome. I'd love to do that. Oh yeah, I got the ice cream. So David says, oh yeah, I got the ice cream. My wife wanted to read out a medieval mead recipe to me. Okay, that sounds good. That's awesome. How's that big bottle full of Woodford Reserve? Well,
it's 1.75, isn't it?
How is that big bottle of Woodford Reserve? Well, it is 1.75, and as far as how it is, it's exactly this good.
You've been chipping away at it. Fair play to you, like.
Yeah, and this isn't my first bottle by any means. I love this stuff.
It's not Palmer's first rodeo when it comes to Woodford Reserve. You know?
No, I do really like it, actually. So, all right. Well, I was going to come in and do like a whole, we are at 17 episodes tonight. We had a little bit of a lot of interruptions as far as internet goes, but 17 is probably the most we've ever had so far, and we're not even at the season finale yet, which in talking with Rusty, you know, we are likely going to be doing the season finale on the next show on Rusty's channel. And like we've started to do, we will be reaching out shortly to current guests of this season to see if they want to participate. We usually will do where we invite folks and have a big finale for the last season episode, which is actually a lot of fun. I found the last one a lot of fun. I think we kind of decided last time we should do it again.
The word has just gone out. So if you want to reserve yourself a spot on the show, you got to say it right now.
Shotgun. Call on shotgun.
Right, so we got one.
Have you sent out? You haven't sent out any other methods yet, Rusty, or
not yet?
Okay, well we are yeah. So typically what we do is if you've been on the season, which Dwayne has, if you've been on this season, then we only have so many spots available. So it is first come, first serve. If you've been on this season, then there is that invitation to jump in and join us on the next show. We'd love to have as many people as we can get on board. That would be great.
And one of our former guests is in the chat room right now. So if he wants to be on,
he can do that. Absolutely.
Speak up or forever hold your peace. You know?
That's right. So we have some interesting topics for tonight. Some of them are even a little esoteric, I think, but I don't know if you want to introduce the one that you suggested, Rusty.
Oh, yeah. The miniature one.
Yeah.
Well, I will if the farm allows. So he's like a half semi allowing himself to be in.
That kind of reminds me of Children of the Corn. It's kind of like, I will if the farm lets me. You know, like, have you ever seen you remember Children of the Corn?
Yeah.
Danley coming in, the sky turns red over the fields.
I think with Dan, it's going to be if the alfalfa lets him. That's what he's got to have to worry about right now.
Dwayne, do you remember Children of the Corn? I didn't get a recognition on your face. It is a good one. It's a good. It's an old. It's a 80s horror film.
No.
It's got good ones.
You know, tumbleweeds going on in my brain at the moment. I'm like,
a lot of dust blowing around and no recognition. I had no knowledge of this place, but yeah. Okay. The topic is, if you could design your own miniature line, it can be any assortment of miniatures that you want. What would it be? What would you put in your miniature line to get started? And could it be sci-fi, fantasy, or modern, or whatever you want to do?
Just any way you want to take it, right? Any way you want to take the discussion. So, Dwayne, did you have a chance to think about this? Because I know I put the topics up, but I wasn't sure if you did.
Yeah, it's only recently been put to me, but like I have opinions on most things regarding wargaming. So, you know, you can throw a curveball at me and I'll probably...
So you're saying you did have a chance. You had a chance.
I've been shown a glimmer of what may potentially be talked about, and I've thought about it. So if I was designing something, I would probably go science fiction, but sort of try and keep it grounded to near future. So, you know, you'll still get that kind of... I'd go for what I like. And I think this is why I like Battletech so much, is it's science fiction, but it's near future. So you're not constrained as much with historical war games set in time periods where they're a lot more structured as to what was and wasn't there. So you have a bit more flexibility, but I also kind of like traditional sort of military hardware as well. So I don't like stuff that's too far-fetched. It's kind of grounded a little bit, sort of, you know. So near science fiction would be something I'd go for, and probably something of a smaller scale, like 6 mil. That I've been trying to hunt. I didn't realize how rare it is, especially in Ireland, to try and get 6 mil infantry. They're as rare as hen's teeth, apparently. Like, it's like, you'll have to go online to buy that sort of thing. But I like the practicality of smaller miniatures and smaller scales, and the enjoyment of being able to paint up a force in a relatively quick period of time compared to 28 or 32 mil miniatures. So if I was going for something, I'd be going sci-fi, a smaller scale for the practicality of it, and also the time saving, the cost. You know, there's quite a lot of factors that have to be taken into account when it comes to game design. But that's the pathway I'd go down.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
So the short answer right now is it would be something near future sci-fi.
I wrote, so the answer is Battletech.
Why reinvent the wheel? Well, you know.
Well, I kind of thought about this quickly, and initially my thought was, because there have been so many times where I've said, I wish I just had those miniatures, and times when that came up were before the Night Models Marvel came out. I was all about, just give me a set of like Marvel miniatures, like as a Marvel sort of freak, you know, and that didn't really have anything but the really old school ones from like way back that were very limited in selection. I was like, just give me Marvel. And like when the Night Models game came out, I was just went ballistic over it, you know, and so I got it. And then the next time was just give me French Indian War miniatures that are like Minden fife and like drum like compatible, like with the what I collect. That's 7 Years of War. Like I want the French Indian War specific miniatures, and I got them. So I was really lucky, and like I went crazy over that, and still am. And then in general, I would say I'm attracted to old school miniatures when it comes to like 40K and fantasy. And so these companies that are now producing miniatures that look like the old school sculpting, you know, of like 40K style miniatures, there's a number of different ones that are doing that right now. Those are really attractive to me. Like I think that I could see as something that I really would gravitate to now, just to see more stuff coming out like that kind of as part of that ethos. But putting that stuff aside, like, because 2 of them out of the 3 I already have, and the one I could get, it really probably, I think a lot of times, I mean, if you're into miniature gaming, like sometimes many people have thought of just, even if it's just on their own, for their own use, making their own game, you know, whether it be miniatures that you have access to, just playing around with like a rule set that maybe you would make for yourself, even if starting simple. And so in a lot of ways I've thought at times, well, it'd be so cool to just have a miniature line for this, because maybe at one time I was thinking about like a steampunk game, or maybe another time I was thinking about like something like Rogue Trader or something like that. And I think sometimes it's the game you want to sort of devise on your own that is the miniature line that you might just want to have all of a sudden because you need them to play that game. And so I don't know, that's kind of the way I thought about it. Just stuff that I always wanted that I couldn't get until I could get it. And then stuff that you might want just for like a very specific thing you're trying to do. And with all the latest rule sets that are coming out that allow you to use miniatures of any kind, that even becomes more relevant, because now it's like I have this rule set, but I don't have like, they don't have their own miniatures, so I have to find the miniatures for that game. And so those would be the ones that I would want, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Rusty?
I'd say what you were saying is it's always something that is a hidden want that you would like to see designed or have designed, because you want to have an army that looks like this or something of that nature. That's kind of like the driving force. And I was always, when it came to mind, it's like, as somebody that has a miniature line myself, that's modern miniatures that I could actually put back into production, I suppose, if I wanted to find somebody to make the molds and stuff for. But
please tell me that's not me.
What?
Is that me? Did I freeze, or did you freeze? I think it was me.
I think everybody's fine with me, but
okay, yeah, it's me.
Mr. Freeze, huh?
Dwayne's like, yeah, it's you.
But where was I going with this one? Oh, so
I was thinking I'm dealing with professionals here. You know what I mean? Come on.
Who gave you that idea?
I forgot to feed the hamster on the wheel.
Yeah, if you had a, it basically comes down to one's desires. And I was looking at it from the aspect of, I'm kind of gearing towards fantasy right now. Lots of fantasy. I've been playing a lot of 15 mil fantasy. And Brad just says, I can see everyone, but are we moving? That's the question. So constantly we have to go, just to make sure we look like we're moving. But anyway, so I was looking at it as, from the aspect of as something along a fantasy line to fill a niche, if you want to build a fantasy army or something like that. That's where I'm going right now, what I desired. Mm-hmm. I'll get into what I would like to see in it, what kind of miniatures and stuff. But now we're back up to the guy in the corner. So. Mr. Scarnier.
Mr. Scarnier. Back into the game I would design. I think it is, like, I think we've all sort of touched on a core thing of, if you were to design your own game, in what place you are with your hobby. And like, if you had have asked me the same question like 5 years ago, I probably would have said like something with orcs in it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
your priorities shift. They do. Like I'm finding as, you know what I mean? I'm in my early 30s now. It's like my priorities in what I want from a game have shifted from what they were in my like mid 20s to what they were when I was a teenager. You know what I mean? What you want out of a game kind of, for me, has changed a bit. And it doesn't always go with times either. So it doesn't mean it's you're gonna go with the what's on trend or what's popular. And
I think Orc Kata Royale, a battle to the death of orcs, just orcs, last one standing. That would be awesome.
Oh yeah. Like some
orcs,
sort of like
100%
gladiatorial combat, or you know what I mean?
on an orc world.
Yeah, exactly. The
For those that like to see green and die, we salute you.
But I think you have touched on something that I find very interesting in the culture of wargaming. I think younger generations, like my sort of generation a bit, and a bit younger as well, that traditional, like that I believe comes from historical wargaming of making your own rule set and making your own scenarios and making the game your own. I think that's sort of been not so much discouraged, but not as promoted in the hobbies as such anymore, because it's leaned heavily into becoming more of a corporate product where, you know, corporate entities dictate what the hobby is and such.
Kind of like the corporate aspect, that they want you to be a one-stop shop here. You only play our stuff. You don't look at anybody else's stuff. You only buy what we have and don't use any imagination beyond what we show you.
And I think that has a knock-on effect where this concept, even the concept of making your own war game or making your own rules, or, you know, some people are very adverse of even using home rules. If it's not the official rules as written, if it's not the official, like, you know, that'll be shot down quite a lot in some gaming groups, which I think is a knock-on effect, which is a point I find interesting, you know.
But that's a good observation too, because I've seen it myself, is that if it isn't produced by an official corporate entity of some type, then it's not a game. So it's not to be used.
I could see how the tournament culture would feed that a little bit, just because everything that's geared towards competition of a product, like, is going to be very much about, you know, whatever's official or whatever, unless they're like having a specific kind of tournament where they change a rule or something. But to a degree, to me, that kind of really goes against that reality, the spirit of wargaming. And when I say that, is when you look back to like how it originated, and even like folks that have been doing it for a really long time, they're usually folks that are all about, you know, the adapting of things and just, you know, making it your own, you know, using it as a starting point, combining things, and just, you know, this idea that it's so tied to a company, like what you do, and just all that. I don't know, it kind of just goes against the whole like setting up like the little wars on the floor, and like just like the home games, and like just all the stuff that wargaming really, in my mind, should be about. So I think that's a bit of a shame when it does kind of go down that road.
Yeah. Like you said something there, like the spirit of wargaming. I'm sure there's, you know, culturally as it's developed, like that concept would seem abhorrent to some people, where if, you know, it needs to be written down and like taken literally, whereas what you like, even what you're touching on, Palmer, like the spirit of wargaming, like that, I think that concept itself being eroded as well. And this is just my personal opinion from my own personal experience and observations, but it's something I feel that I'm kind of observing to a certain extent, and its knock-on effects.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you that you do see a lot of that, or there is a lot of individuals that if it isn't written down and it's written or said verbatim, it doesn't exist. You can't do that, or you can't allow this or that, and so
how can we encourage it then? Sorry.
And it's funny, we're kind of going off on a tangent, but I kind of like it. Like, you know, like I kind of would encourage it. my thought though too is that I'm going to be a little hypocritical for a second, because I actually I've always been one to respect people that keep their games to a few games or less, like, you know, that just play 1 game, 2 games, that are just like really absorb the game and fully appreciate it before just discarding it after 1 day or less than a day and never playing it again. You know, I like, so like you guys with BattleTech, like I like folks that or go foot first, all in, play it for a real long time, can say I primarily play 3 games, you know, but I play them like, and I'm pretty dedicated to them and I enjoy them. And I like to experience games that way. Having said that, and where I'm going to be hypocritical is there are some folks that you meet and they only play 1 game, but they really have never played anything else, it seems like, or they don't really try. And they're kind of company oriented, like you're talking about, like they're really knowledgeable about the game that they're playing. But when you kind of like talk to them about anything else, it's sort of like a blank face, like they just don't have anywhere to go, like in the conversation. And I wonder how much of that contributes to what we're talking about. Cause like, I don't like to encourage people necessarily to play like a million games and just like never dedicate yourself to anything. But sometimes when you don't try anything else, or you're not open to anything else, you almost kind of lose out on like the overall wargaming experience in some ways, in my mind.
I get you. And I kind of liken it to going to the buffet. It's like, you know, if you just go to a buffet and there's only that one thing you eat all the time and you don't deviate from it, how are you not to know that like something 2 feet away from you, you might like it better? So I totally get what you're saying, and my approach is I have my core games, but if somebody wants to introduce me to another game, or I see a game and it piques my interest for one reason or another, like Bolt Action, I've an interest in it. I don't collect it. I think I've like 1 Tiger tank. I've been introduced to it once, but I can see that there's certain elements of it that I like. But that's only because, you know, I go out of my way to try other games a little bit, just to dabble, you know, my first impression. Do I like it? Do I not? I'm like, oh yeah, it's interesting. I like these things. I don't like these things. It doesn't mean I have to fully invest. You know, you have to sort of sample the buffet and find out what you really like. You know what I mean?
You know, definitely is that I have some people that it's like the group I'm local here that I play with, we play, it's like, you see all the games I play. We're constantly shifting what we're playing all the time, because I guess we play it, get kind of tired of it, and move on to the next one. And sometimes it leaves me going, but I want to go back and play that other one because I really like that one. That was fun. And we just kind of eventually get back to it. And like when I go play with my brothers, some of the family members, they play 1 game, 1 game only. And it's like it's BattleTech and that's it. And then when you start discussing, and you start telling them, it's like, okay, how about we play it this way? And it's like, well, you can't play it that way. But you can play it as a miniature game. And
do they watch this show, Rusty?
No.
You might get a sword to the neck.
I have one brother that might watch it, but I doubt it. And it's on your channel, so I can guarantee they're not watching it now. So.
Well, yeah, that explains it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you try to tell them, it's like, we can play this as a miniature game. It's like, no, you can't. But we do it all the time. But it's like, no, you can't play it that way. And we just had this, I had this argument with them on Saturday. We're sitting there, it's like, well, we could always play it as, it's like, no, you can't do it that way. And he's like, you have to turn, I was like, no, you don't. You just, it's like, I tried to tell him, it's like, you can't play it that way. That's not possible. And it's like, what do you mean it's not possible? I play it that way all the time. But they're just like fixated. It's like, if it doesn't say it, you can do it that way in the book. You can't do it. So you get that kind of individual. So
it's interesting when some people do get sort of locked into one sort of mindset and in regards to what game they want to play. But I think that's, you know, depending on your gaming situation and your social circle, there really needs to be a bit of give and take, I think, with folks. You know, like if me and Palmer were meeting up on the regular to play games, you know what I mean? There has to be some form of reciprocation where I'd turn around and go, look, I'll play French Indian War, you know, this week with you if you'll play BattleTech with me next week. You know what I mean? There has to be some give and take. When people just stick and they're like,
It's
no,
when the
I'm only
phone stops
playing this."
ringing.
Well, yeah.
Just
You know.
kidding.
But it
No,
happens
you're-
though. It happens.
you're right,
like,
though.
the social circles sort of break down into cliques. Then, if people are only really willing to play one game, or it's like, oh well, there's the guys who play this game and there's the guys who play that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's some people who bounce in between and try a bit of everything. You know?
I kind of see it a little bit within my social circles for gaming locally. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the Venn diagram, like, the rings that sort of intersect. And like, I kind of find that's the way it is in some ways, like in that, you have like where the rings intersect among friends, and like which ones, like you might have like a group of people and then like 80% of them will play this game, but then like 80% will play another game too. But then like some of the folks drop out from the first one, but then you pick up a couple of folks, and it's just sort of like that a bit. And even with like folks that I play when I do play live before COVID, play regularly, we have ones where we both like it enough to a degree, like these certain games, that they're the ones we regularly play, and then and it's kind of like what Dwayne said.
You always have your circle. I was just imagining what you were just saying. It's like you get your fantasy group here in that circle, you got your historical group in this circle, and then you got your sci-fi guys in here, and you got overlapping. So some guys will play all three. Then you have some that only play maybe these two, and then you only have some that only play. They're only going to be up in the upper corner of one circle, and they don't go outside their circle. And when you reach the border of that other circle overlapping, they go, I'm not touching that.
David thought that this was the Rangers of Shadow Deep forum that he'd entered into, and he's kind of wondering whether like this was the place he was supposed to be. He says, all Rangers of Shadow Deep all the time.
What have I wandered into? I thought you guys were talking about miniatures, and now you're off on a tangent. Yes.
Isn't this the Fantasy Skirmish live podcast?
You're in the wrong neck of the woods, my friend.
Well, we're not. What? How did I get here?
We have the potential to become if we wanted to. That's how flexible we are.
Yeah. So that's an interesting tangent on, what's the miniature line that you would like, but I think it's also applicable too, in the sense that if you were to ask somebody that we're kind of describing, that would never see themselves beyond a certain company's game, you ask them like, what's the miniature line that they would like if they could have, and like they wouldn't even understand the question, because it's like there is only one. It's the one that's given to them.
It's the one they give me. That's all I get.
And it's the one that's given to them that actually miraculously gets the best rules each time it's released.
The new one. I get new miniatures. Okay, they're going to be the best now, so I got to go collect that army.
But like when we're talking about miniatures, like straight away I'm thinking of rule sets as well. The rule set is going to reflect quite a lot on how the miniatures are done. For instance, the first rule that comes to mind when we're talking about miniature design is the gaming system going to have true line of sight or not? That's going to make a big difference on what the miniatures are, their poses, their designs. You know what I mean? I think that's probably the number one thing that would affect a game's miniature designs in my eyes more than anything else. Are you going for like true line of sight and literal, or are you going for an abstract game? Where things don't have to be as hashed out in regards to, you can have crazy poses if you want, or things don't have to be quite in scale with each other. But if you're doing true line of sight, everything has to be within, scale and all. Oh, it can't be bigger than it's supposed to be officially. And you know what I mean? It's the rules will reflect miniature design, or they should do in my eyes.
Yeah.
You should take that sort of stuff into account.
Yeah, if you're doing a true line of sight, those miniatures that are like up on a rock jumping or something with their weapon in the air, flying through the air like they're leaping to and fro like they're in the ballet, it's like they're standing at half an inch taller than the guys kneeling down. Well, the guy kneeling down is going to be nice and hidden behind the rock wall, but the guy that's jumping is like, he's right there. I can see him. So type of deal. That's going to make a big difference in your design.
Yeah, I find that the more tactically oriented games really have to deal with that heavily. And like I bring up Infinity a lot, and the fact that they have volume based on, you know, different volume sizes for the miniature, that so it doesn't actually, you can even just take the volume card and put it where the miniature is and not even worry about the miniature. They do a really good job at that because it's like so tournament and minded, and when they made the game and tactically driven. But you know, for a lot of stuff that I play, like Saga and stuff, because we talked about it before, like I don't think it's really as much of an issue. And I guess it really kind of depends on that level of intensity.
And the rule sets and how it handles it. Like, I would have thought a good go between would be like what you've described for Infinity. I know of Infinity, but I've never played of it. And, you know, one way around it would be, volume. I would have thought, like, do you ever see when guys are playing snooker or pool, where if they remove the ball, they'll have like a piece that, you know, they can put the ball back. Yeah, you know, I would have thought you'd have something like that, and you'd have a cylinder that represents whatever the official volume is, and then you go from there and then put the miniature back. You know what I mean?
Well, and I don't know if I guess they probably put it behind it in most cases, but that's basically what they do. They're like, basically, some people actually 3D print cylinders that are for Infinity for that reason, but they also just print cards that are just basically a card that you would put right behind the miniature that just shows, if you can see this card, you know, you can put it right in front of the miniature. If you could see this, then, you know, then you can see them. Yeah. And then they because they also like to have elaborate sculpts and things too, you know, that's part of the hobby as well. And so sometimes you would, the sculpt wouldn't matter. You know, you could do whatever you want, wouldn't matter.
And a good example is like, you look at Hordes or War Machine, it goes by the base. You know, a large base will block a medium base or a small base behind it. You can hide behind stuff, but you can't hide if you got a small miniature in front of a big miniature. Well, obviously the big miniature is still going to be visible because he's big, you know, that type of deal. You're just not going to block it. So you got that aspect of the game too. So it doesn't really matter how tall your miniature is. It's just they go by bases. So.
You know, the other simple answer for some people, when you say, what is the miniature line that I want, you know, it's actually the miniature line that I want to paint, you know, and because just to some degree, what separates, you know, like the miniature gamers versus the like hex gamers or the board gamers to some degree is their love of the aesthetics. And so what is the miniature line that I want to paint? And then, you know, you could do a whole subject on that, like a whole show, like, or topic, what is the miniature line I want to paint? And then like somebody could say, well, you know, in some ways, it's actually the genre that inspires me. You know, it's like, so the miniature line I want to paint is the genre that inspires me. And the miniature line that I want to get is actually ultimately the genre that inspires me.
Well, it could be different though. Like for me, like if you're asking me the miniatures that I'd want to paint, it's sort of Warhammer Fantasy Orcs. I think whoever was the under sculpting in and around the early 2000s. Like if I really wanted to paint a miniature, I think they're absolutely beautiful. Like they're absolutely, you know, cracking sculpts. But that's not necessarily what I want to play either. You know, we're fussy creatures, you know, us wargamers. You know, we'll split hairs amongst many things. You know?
Yep, absolutely.
The miniature line I want to paint is the one that inspires me at the moment that I want to play with. That's pretty much how it is.
You got your Venn diagram all centered, Rusty.
Yeah,
you're like 15mm fantasy or bust.
Well, I've kind of wandered. I'm getting away from that right now.
Because we're all fickle creatures.
Yeah, I'm fickle.
Right?
No,
what is it now? Now is it 55mm?
No, I need to get back to painting 28mm undead.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, like I have, we talked about collecting a lot on the channel as an aspect of the hobby, and that fits into this discussion too. And like I have a Zinch Force for 40K that's just sort of calling to me and from boxes and that I added to over time. And I'm always like looking for a little piece to add to it. And I've always kind of thought to myself, you know, I'm going to be basically doing that at one point. And I don't even like, I guess I can just go back to one of the older rule sets and play it for Warhammer 40,000, but I'm even open to using other rule sets, you know, for science fiction, to use it to play, because I just, want to paint it and want to use it somehow. That's really it. And so we all have different reasons. Like Dwayne said too, this is what I would want to do if you just asked me what I wanted to paint, but it's not necessarily what I'm want to play at the moment. But it's a driving factor, all these different things as to what we want to do ultimately.
Like even if like you're focused on the gaming aspect of it, the miniatures still, official miniature lines still play a large part on it. And I know we keep going back to BattleTech, I know, but it really is kind of
first official
the difference in miniatures. Like the new sculpts are bringing in a whole line of people, and then I posted up on a Facebook page. I have the difference between some of the old sculpts and some of the new sculpts is quite drastic. Even just scale wise, aesthetics are slightly different, and it's interesting to see the divide in that regard. Now I've gone off on such a tangent, I don't know where I'm going with it, but I just find it interesting how some people will really love older sculpts and there'll be a specific aesthetic with them. And then if there's a line change with aesthetics, maybe the in-house sculptors have changed or the standard that they're going for is different. Not to say that it's better or worse, but you'll see a shift. And I've found that with myself personally. Like any of the new Games Workshop 40k orc stuff that I'm into the faction, I'm not really that fussed about the sculpts. Their in-house aesthetic has changed compared to what it was in the 2000s, and it's all CAD design now. So I feel it took me a while to hash out that it's the hand sculpting, the aesthetic of the hand sculpting, the detail is different. Like that Beastman chariots that you're doing up, that sort of the Beastman army, that's the era of sculpts, and you were showing off one of the Beastman champions. I used to have them, but that era of sculpt and the sculptors that they have, the designers for that and the art style, I love that stuff. Like, if you're, that's the favorite sort of era and aesthetic. It's just the sculpting style, whichever artist they had. I love that stuff. Absolutely love it.
You had showed that that BattleTech, those two miniatures, and I didn't really say what I wanted to say. I mean, what I had actually said is just a joke. Like, I firmly believe more is more. When you show like the one sculpt next to the other. To be quite honest, I like the older sculpt much more than the newer one. Like of those two, like I don't want to like kind of piss on the people that just bought the new sculpt, and stuff, and the whole like re-emergence of BattleTech, or I should say, I don't think it's ever really went away, but the whole like re-interest that's happening with the newer stuff. I think it's a nice looking miniature, don't get me wrong. And I for people that like the mechs, I think they look really cool. I just think that older sculpt just screams like retro game. Like I just love it. Like there's just no contest between the two for me.
We all have our preferences. Doesn't mean anyone's right or wrong.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I don't even really play the game. I've got some miniatures that have the game, but I don't really play it. But I just absolutely love the older one. You put them next to each other, there's no contest.
This is the thing. You know what you like and you don't like, and that's fine. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could just disagree over it.
Oh,
that's why there's so many different
you
things
like the
out
newer
there.
one better?
Yeah, for some of them, yeah. Oh, definitely. When it came to that Vulture one, I like the newer one better, but I know Rusty doesn't. You know what I mean? But that's fine. We don't have to murder each other over it.
Yeah. I'll find you.
You dare refuse my bashal?
Why don't we go back? Why don't we go through some of the comments and just take a look what everybody's saying here? We have got, I believe, after the farming discussion, Dan says, "You are correct, Rusty. All about the hay, but I will likely be available." And of course, like usual, the answer is BattleTech. And I think in regards to your comments earlier, Dwayne, maybe with the modern stuff, David says doesn't. Yeah,
I'd say while you're going at, the one thing you look at is epic scale miniatures. There's a lot of third-party stuff out there you can use to make as your infantry.
6 millimeters and less. And like it says that Scotia Grendel has them. I think during my little interruption here, Brad was just kind of helping along just as to what the audience is seeing. And David's like, all Rangers of Shadow Deep all the time. Let's see here. Brad says, it's hard to figure out what type of miniature line I would like, so many different genres. And Brad, I know you collect a lot of cool stuff. Like when something comes out, like, you know, some retro cartoon or whatever that like they didn't have miniatures for, like you will pick them up. I've seen lots of interesting stuff that you've picked up in that regard. Some people have pretty, David says, some people have pretty interesting hangups on games. I recently encountered a guy who's ranting about how inferior skirmish games that use a D6 are. And yeah, I guess that's a good point, because like there is that aspect too. Like there are people that are hardcore opinionated on mechanics, you know, and what they like and what they don't like. And like you hear a lot on how people talk about how there's so many more options with like a D10 or something like that, you know, just being able to.
If you're not using a D20, you're wrong.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like there's that component too, I suppose, where people can really get focused. Warhammer Fantasy Battle Orcs from the early 90s to the early 2000s is my next month's project. Tune in on Axe Annex, the YouTube channel, because that's nice. David's channel, same name. And hello, Addicted to Lead. Thanks for joining in tonight. He says, I've been drooling over some Larry Elmore licensed sculpts to paint. No gaming use for them. And, you know, that's a good point, too. Like, as miniature wargaming channels, like we primarily are thinking wargaming. Although over time, I've more and more been picking up things just to paint at times. Like that Mohawk that I did recently that was 54 millimeters. Did a little diorama kind of thing for it. I mean, like that's a lot of fun too, is to buy stuff purely, you know, just to paint them. And Larry Elmore, you know, and people that are into the old D&D for sure, I can see I'd probably be interested in that too, actually.
Yeah, sometimes you can have miniatures that you paint and have around that have no use for them, other than just painting them and having them.
Yeah. But actually, isn't that better, having them painted and really liking them, than actually like planning to use them to gaming but never painting them?
Yeah.
Like even what Rusty said is a very, it sort of, it probably hits the point home that, you know, being a war gamer, it's like, you know, what's, you know, having painted miniatures, they're just kind of laying around. As a wargamer, you're kind of like, you know, this sort of expectation that they have to be used for something, you know?
They need to come alive.
Yeah.
They need to move.
I always think of them as like the night at the museum, right? It's like when you paint them, they come alive.
David says, you want to play some of the one-page rules Grimdark Future, Palmer. Has Brad tried to entice you? He hasn't, I don't think. I have had a number of rule sets pass my way and looked into alternatives for, let's say, 40K Rogue Trader. One of them that came to mind, I think, is called Rebel Scout. It's called Rebel something else. I did show it to Rusty, and I watched a YouTube bat rep, and it looks really good. From a nostalgic perspective, it seems to really tap into the Rogue Trader kind of feel and kind of atmosphere. And so I am potentially planning on looking at that one. But I would be open to lots of different ones. I did try some that I didn't like. And so I have to keep looking. Class Mad Dog is king.
I think he means classic Mad Dog is king. We're talking about the new and old sculpts.
Okay.
Your preference. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Classic. Yeah. Sorry. There we go. Corrected it there. So, Renegade Scout. Yeah. Nordic Weasel Games. I've been 100% Rogue Trader on it. So Dave is familiar with it. It looked kind of good to me from what I saw, but I've not been able to try it yet. And Brad says, I have the rules if you want to check them out. At one point, for sure. I think I'll probably need to... I could, right behind me here, I have like Space Orc and Space Elf Force that I could easily use for it. So I probably should just do it rather than wait for my Thousand Suns. I said Tzeentch, but really I have a hardcore old sculpt, Tzeentch Renegades or Thousand Sun sculpts, like the original metal ones, solid metal pose ones that I am building the entire Tzeentch army around. So yeah, it looks like we are caught up. So,
All
what do you guys think? Have we kind of?
Well, we haven't
Anybody
even
else have
gotten
anything?
into talking about what kind of miniatures you would want.
I think we just came full circle. Because of Rusty. We haven't even talked about what kind of miniatures you want.
6 mil near future. There you go. Sci-fi.
Not even sure what year I'm in right now. What kind of miniatures do I want?
Well, I was just thinking, it's like if you're going to design a miniature line, what would you want in it? Actually, that's the big question. What kind of miniatures? If you're going to do a sci-fi line, if you could near future sci-fi line, are they going to look like moderns, or are they going to look like, I was just thinking.
I've been actually thinking about potentially designing alternates to quite a few of the BattleTech vehicles myself, because we're in the area we're in. The software to design stuff is free.
Yeah,
there's 3D printers out there, resin that is comparable to what you can buy. So, like, literally, we're discussing it, but there's nothing stopping any of us apart from just investing the time to sit down and design your own miniatures, or design your own terrain pieces. You know what I mean? Just sit down and decide what your priorities are. You know what I mean? What you want out of it.
I have one word answer. If you ask me, one word answer. What is the miniature line that I want? Metal.
Hey, you can 3D print metal too. It's just really expensive.
Metal.
I want metallic. I want metallic.
Let's start from there. Metal.
I was just thinking, I was thinking of like a fantasy line, what I was going with. And it was like, all right, if I was going to do a fantasy line, what would I kind of miniatures I would like to have? And the first thing that popped into mind was dwarves that are beastmen. Like,
I'm a sucker for a good dragon as well. Even though I like a lot of sci-fi stuff, like a really nicely sculpted dragon. Yeah.
With a dragon with augmented armor.
I mean, you could go that way. I'd probably think more traditional European style would be my thing, but there's Oriental, cybernetic. The world's your oyster.
Yeah. Dragons are popular.
I was thinking of crocodilian warriors. So they got the big long croc snout on the front, So they got the big burly monstrous arms and everything, but they got the big snout on the front. So if they're just like swinging everything and they go chomp down.
Well, straight away, as soon as you're saying that, I'm thinking like they'll have, I'm thinking Wargames. Yeah, if they hit you with both, or if they're like close combat attacks, they get a free biting attack or something. You know what I mean? Straight away, my brain's like rules.
Leather skin, alligator skin, toughness, +1 toughness.
Exactly. Regenerative abilities of crocs. You know what I mean? And
then I was also thinking, it's like, okay, if I have crocodilian warriors, they're going to die eventually or get killed in battle. I could have skeleton crocodilian warriors. So that was something that popped in my head too.
Being led by a necromancer who has crocodile boots that talk to him.
Oh. These boots just make my skin crawl.
Yeah. Interesting. There's so many different ways to go with it. The reason I said metal is because like my favorite miniatures, whether they be historicals or fantasy or sci-fi, no matter what you do, like you just go across the board. And even Infinity, like even my modern games, like they're always metal for me. Like I'm trying to think, even I have the Marvel plastics, like from the Marvel Crisis Protocol, but to be quite honest, as much as I love the miniatures, and I mean, I like it, I don't cherish it the way I cherish the others, like that are metal. And so across the board, and even like different types of sculpting. And so, yeah, it's just a medium that I like. Some people hate it, like it just depends on the person.
Well, I'm not a big fan of metal miniatures that you have to assemble a whole bunch of parts to get them together. And they got the little, like, small connection points.
Mhm.
You know, I've gone to that problem with in War Machine or Hordes, and you got these miniatures. They got the little bitty. It's like you got these arms, and you got this little point you connect, and then if you somehow grab the model wrong and just snap off an arm or something, that can be a pain. But,
yeah, there's limitations for sure, and like it probably goes to show why I love like fixed single pose like sculpts, you know, like that are metal. I mean, those are my favorites. Infinity has gotten a lot better, and I do really like their miniatures, but those are multi-pose like you're talking about, Rusty. The original ones that came out, I had a little more trouble with, like you're talking about. I hate it when you actually have that situation you're talking about, and you have to basically create part of the body out of crazy glue, like to get them to be together. It's like I actually have an upper right torso that's crazy glue.
How can I mount this arm so it's attached to another piece of the body that's solid? It's like, okay, I'm holding the weapon so it's like touching a leg or something like that. So I'm getting 2 connection points instead of 1.
Yeah.
You joke about it, but I literally had to do it with like a Warhammer Fantasy Shaman, where it's like his staff coming down. It's like there's a section of that staff that is literally just like super glue. That's all it is.
I like that sculpt. I have that sculpt.
I love it. But this is what I mean. Like I absolutely love this stuff. You know what I mean? I'm sure you can't see it in focus as such, but you know, I absolutely love this sculpt. Now autofocus isn't doing anything, but you get the idea. It's
there it is.
Go.
Yeah, it's a beautiful skull.
Oh yeah. Like I probably won't use this in a war game because I don't plan on playing fantasy, but I absolutely love that sculpt. Like it's beautiful. It really is. The style that it's done in, you know, that sort of kicked off. That sculpt is, I forget the name of the sculptor, but that sculpt kind of kicked off what orcs, the orc aesthetic in the Warhammer range became for a long time. That sort of that big jutting jaw and the tusks and such. So yeah, like I kind of had to get it because it's kind of a historic piece to me personally as well at the same time. But it's, you know, it's one of those bits that I just had to get it. I don't plan on playing a fantasy game with it, but I know I want to paint it. You know.
Before we go through all the comments, I usually do them in order, but I just want to touch on this one. Dan Booman says, Palmer, how much of your love for metal miniatures do you think is attributed to nostalgia? I would say that that's half true, and because it is true. Like I am heavily influenced by nostalgia in my wargaming overall. But what I would say to why it's only half true is that games like Burrows and Badgers and Infinity are not really as rooted in nostalgia for me. Like Infinity is almost purely not nostalgia. Like here's just a guy I've got sitting here waiting for paint. Let's see here. So I'm not sure if I can show him real well, but basically I have this guy and, you know, he's really not nostalgic in his sculpting. I love the detail on Infinity models, and I love the quality of their casting by Corvus Belli. And so that a lot of times I'll remind myself how much I love metal when I'm working with the Infinity models. And it's for a totally opposite reason when I'm collecting like my old school Beastmen from like 1989. You know, it's like a totally opposite thing. Now, the Burrows and Badgers is nostalgic in the sense that it reminds me of the stories that like my grandmother read to me when I was like 8 years old, you know. And so, but it's not, or actually 6 years old probably. But it's not the actual miniatures themselves. Like I just think the quality of the casting and like the actual sculpting in metal is really nice. I really like it. And so it carries through. Like my love of metal really carries through the nostalgia and into the modern techniques with people that do it well today. I just prefer it. And I love the heft of the metal model. I love, like, there's so many aspects to it that I really like. Yeah.
But there is that aspect, that heft. It's like, you know, like it has a value to it. It's like our brains sort of assign things that are heavier to being intrinsically, you know, they're more valuable or something like that. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. But you brought up an interesting point that I'm sort of thinking to myself. Is it nostalgia that I like that era of metal? And I don't believe so. I think for me, the metals that I like is the style of sculpting. Now, will that translate directly across if they had done it in plastic, those exact same sculpts? I don't know. That's the type of thing I'm asking myself now. But if you got exactly the same results in plastic that you got in the metals, I would have opted for the plastics because easier to chop and change. But then you don't
look at it in one way, going like old school 40K. Most of my stuff is metal, and it's nostalgia. That's one of the things I like about it because it brings back a lot of memories. But with the modern miniatures that are plastic, most of them, or some of the ones that are from Forge World I have that are resin, it's the army that I like. So it can go both ways, I guess.
Oh, absolutely.
Just whatever medium that army's coming out that I like, then that's what, I guess, it doesn't matter what it's coming out in. It's just that I like the army. That's it.
And the reality is, like, because I never quite did it. I never went full on in, but I really wanted to do the whole AdMech thing, like, and actually more so Mechanicum than Mechanicus. I like the Mechanicus stuff, but the Mechanicum from Forge World when it first came out, I mean, I was reading the books and I was so in my head into this idea of like doing like a Mechanicum force. It was really just price and a lot of things that stopped. But even though it's not metal, I mean, in my mind, like some of the old sculpting and the Forge World resin is beautiful. I mean, like that stuff is just, some of it's just gorgeous, and so I can see people getting into that as well. All resin, like the crap cast and all that stuff has its
fail cast.
Bad stuff too. David says it's crunchier than my brain likes, and I think he's talking about Renegade Scout. I tend to fall asleep when reading Renegade Scout, and I mean, but you probably fall asleep twice as fast if you read Rogue Trader then, like, because like in all honesty, that was really crunchy too. Like, back in that time. I think it definitely lends to that, is what it seems like. I'd have to really kind of try it out myself. I mean, I like the idea of the crunchier rule set, but then of course, depending on like what you're ready for at that time, you may find that it's too much. I can understand that. Brad says, I want customization in a line. And so if that's the case, if you're talking about like the miniatures you want, so then you want something that you can customize and perhaps even
multi-pose versus single
plastic
pose
kits. Yeah. And so when it comes to having your own miniature line, creating your own miniature line, Digital says there's nothing stopping us except talent. That is true. Not having the talent is a big barrier.
And always commission people.
Yeah, that
is
is
true. You can
true.
always hire somebody to do it for you, and then if you got the money, you can say, "Hey, could you design this for me?" And you pay them, and it's still yours. So
that's true.
Even though they designed it.
Multiracial skeletons would be interesting.
That's going off what I was talking about earlier about having, something you design an army, you always make it in skeletons too.
Mm-hmm. You think that you could ever get ghoul skeletons?
Well,
kind of interesting.
A ghoul is just a immature skeleton.
So, see, I always thought skeletons were less serious.
There's less to them. No, they're pretty simple.
Like, well, in what context? If we're talking like Warhammer Fantasy, I always thought the ghouls were the less serious. But in that setting, ghouls are actually alive; they're not undead.
Yeah,
I always felt the zombies were the jokes, and that the skeletons were the serious business. Like,
so there's really not much difference between a zombie and a skeleton.
Skeletons are more mature. More of a dry sense of humor,
and have the flesh fall off them.
They have like a dry sense of humor. You have to admit.
They have a bigger funny bone.
They're like a fine wine, That's what the necromancer does. He just sort of puts them in plots and rotates them until they, the skeleton's, done. He's got his little egg timer.
Yeah.
We're waiting to mature these zombies up. You know what I mean?
I absolutely hate modern Iron Wind metals, multi-part battle mechs.
I do have a pet peeve when it comes to Iron Winds. When it comes to this, is that you'll have looking at something and it's like, why did they not just sculpt this into the leg or the arm or something? They could have easily done it. No, let's just make it in multi pieces, so it's like a kit. Well, if I wanted to put together a metal kit, I'm not that big a fan. That's one thing I hate, is assembling metal miniatures.
But coming from like a 40k orc player, where you sort of chop and convert stuff, I can see where you're coming from. Trying to assemble some of the connection points on some of these metal mechs is like, if you stare at them too hard, they'll probably snap.
Yeah.
But I can also see the charm of having them in pieces, where you can take your missile, your LRM launchers off of a mech and put them onto a different one, because you don't need to cut it. It's sort of in pieces already. You could do a bit of chopping and changing if you want.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pros and cons.
In it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm old school when it comes to BattleTech, because like you have an arms, and so you had a torso, pair of legs that are one set, and then you have the arms, and you put them together. So nowadays you have 10 pieces where you used to have 4 or 5.
Brett says plastic shoulders for customization. So that's kind of like what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And David says, I find it harder to drop metal miniatures, but more tragic when I do. So it's like that's good though. So it's like living on the edge. Like you have your passion, and then it's all win or all lose.
It's the same thing when it comes to resin miniatures too.
Ooh.
They're really easy to put together and nice to paint, but don't drop them.
Yeah, if you step on them, there's no coming back.
Like dropping a metal miniature, it's gonna break, and 9 times out of 10, it's gonna break along the glue lines. Dropping a resin miniature, you're gonna get breaks in places where there weren't supposed to be connection points. You know what I mean? That's
you end up with a jigsaw puzzle, but it wasn't a jigsaw. It was a jigsaw puzzle before, but now it's a multi pieces where you don't have.
A jigsaw puzzle with more pieces than you initially put it together. That's the.
Now I had one of my Mechanicum conveyors I got from Forge World. My son dropped something off the shelf and it hit it and knocked it on the floor, and it goes. I'm like, that's a $200 miniature. And he was like practically crying when he seen it. He was like, I'm sorry, Dad.
Brett says, I know someone who does some 3D sculpting. I definitely think that's becoming not unheard of now. Like, to actually know somebody that does it. Oh, yeah. Speaking of having minis designed for you, CP Models has the old Angel Barracks 6mm line. So I'm assuming
when it comes
that's
to organic stuff, organic sculpting, I think you'd probably have to commission someone. But I think anyone can, if they put enough time into it, design buildings or vehicles or anything that doesn't require sort of traditional sculpting of flesh and somewhat. If you're doing objects, I think anyone can do it if they just put time into it. So even if like money is your constraint, and it's free software out there, like go on to Tinkercad, you know, you can literally sit down and design anything.
In a lot of ways, like for the organic sculpting on the computer where you're actually doing figurines, like and like that kind of stuff, in a lot of ways, I think it takes the same mind, like it's just a different output of it. Like I think the folks that actually sculpt like organically on the computer, I'm not saying it's the same result, but like if you actually already sculpt like traditionally, and then like you get shown an application on how to actually design in a computer, I think you'd be like light years ahead of somebody that's never sculpted. Because like the artistry is in the head, right? I mean, like there is there is muscle memory, but it's like a lot of it's in the head. Like it's seeing what you want to see is the artist, right?
Different medium, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people make the transition, and I think they're much better positioned to do it if they're already an artist. But
like the Perry twins, who are traditional sculptors, the last item that one of them sculpted for Games Workshop before they left was the Smog for the Lord of the Rings, the dragon. And I can't remember if it was Alan or Michael, but I was watching an interview about it where he was like, oh, well, just digitally sculpt the head. And then he ended up doing the whole thing digitally sculpted.
Mhm.
But, that's because he knows about sculpting, which is what you were talking about, and then just translated it over to a different medium. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that like skill set can be translated over, and like they'll be light years ahead of the likes of me trying something like that. Where,
No, and or me. And the interesting thing about the digital sculpting is that you can kind of go in so far, like, and make details. Like, you can go in so close. Like, you're not limited to like a dentist tool or something, like to make like a scale. Like, like you can go in and like get down to like such a granular level, like to make designs. And as long as you have the technology to print it or produce it, cast it, then the sky's the limit. But then that doesn't mean just making the most realistic sculpt in the world from our eyes doesn't mean that's the aesthetic that we like the most. And that's where, if you like traditional sculpting, you like it in the way that it's you enjoy that genre. Like, you just enjoy the look of it. It just brings back in memories, nostalgia, and also you just enjoy that aesthetic. No kind of talent and greater technology is going to just supplement and change that. Sorry, ghouls are posers. I never took them. They're just going halfway there.
But they weren't dependable. When I did a Vampire Counts Army back in the day, I didn't really bother much with ghouls either. It was,
Yeah.
skeletons and zombies,
The feet to leg to hip multi-part joints on IWM battle mechs always go poorly for me.
Iron and metals. and then it's like you have to try to figure out how to hold the legs in a certain way, or get the feet on in a certain way while you're trying to put the legs together. And it's just like, and then you got it right, and it's like, and then you go pull your hands away, and you're like, I glued myself to it.
Glued yourself to various bits. I think the issue there is what they're trying to execute. I think they're using the wrong materials. So if they were using that same practice and theory behind miniature assembly with plastics, I think a lot of people would be happier. But using it with metals, not as much.
Looks like we've got 2 more comments, and I think maybe we'll get on to our next topic, because I think we probably can do it before the end of the show, the next topic. We've got the first mini, the Perry Twin. The first mini, the Perry Twin that was in the accident, sculpted after his accident, was the green, and I think he goes on to say the Green Knight.
Yeah,
I think, and that is talent. I know the Green Knight is a really desirable miniature too, for Bretonians. Yeah, like whenever you go on anything where people are looking for it, it always commands high market prices today.
It's like, even the today's standards, it's an absolutely beautiful sculpt.
Absolutely. Looks like David has to bolt. Thanks for your comments and participation there, David. Appreciate it. All right. So what do you say, guys? Let's go on to our next topic. This one might be considered a little esoteric, but it went something like narrative gaming, which is something that is brought up a lot, whether it be people talking about solo gaming or just any game trying to incorporate the narrative element, whether it be games that are miniature games that try to incorporate role-playing components to it. Narrative gaming to your miniature gaming. Is it great? Can you not get enough of it? Like, what do you think about it? Or is it also a bit of a slippery slope when it comes to tabletop miniature wargaming?
Good question.
Rusty, do you want to go first on that one? Looks like that forced you to get another drink.
I'm too sober for this one.
I think I'm going to join you for that one.
I need some brain food. All right, so 1749.
I'm not going full glass on this one.
I just noticed something. It has the date 1749 on this.
Wow, that looks not that old.
Huh?
That doesn't look that old.
No, that is, but I think that's when the distillery came about, was 1749. But yeah, sometimes you could look at it as narrative play is, you know, the that one 800-pound gorilla company always like to say, always play narrative, design it to be narrative. Like, but really, a lot of times everybody just wants to, all right, tell me how many points to bring and I'll bring it, and then we'll just throw down. And that's what a lot of people really like to do. I don't know how many people like to play. It's like, all right, this is the scenario we're going to play, and this is what you're going to have to play with. And like, oh, do I have to?
So you're finding that sometimes it's too restrictive.
Yeah. Because if you're playing a game and you look at what you want to play and how you like to play the game, I want to build the army the way it's catered to me, and then not getting stuck with, you walk in and say, all right, this is what you're going to play. Here's your army. Go play with it. And they're like, I really don't even know how to play this army. So, but okay.
So you basically want to see your enemies driven before you and hear the lamentation of the women.
Yep.
Like that's not so much the narrative. It's more about the numbers and the kills.
It's like, I'm going to go find their camp followers and round them up and put them in chains. I'm sorry.
How about you, Dwayne? What do you think? Your first initial reaction to this esoteric concept?
Narrative. When you're saying narrative straight away, I'm thinking like one-sided battles and stuff like that. The things that you're not going to come across that Rusty was talking about, where you're going to organize a game with someone and you say, hey, we're going to play battle value 10,000 points in this area in Battletech, or we're playing 2,000 points in Warhammer Fantasy, or we're playing 2,000 points in 40k. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff I find doesn't really scratch the itch that I'm looking for in war games anymore. Whereas what I've been mucking around, we've been playing Megamech because we're still in quarantine here, still in lockdown, we still have restrictions, and we've been playing some of the Clan Invasion era stuff for Battletech, and there's some interesting mechanics that have been thrown into it, but it's narrative. Like the opposing force is picked, so there's four of us, there's two veteran players who have organized it, and there's me and another guy who are kind of new, and we've put in lore style mechanics to set up the games in that the clans in the game itself, the clans, when they went to attack a planet, they'd issue a challenge to the planet would say what defenders they have, and then the clanners would in and amongst themselves then have a bidding war to see who could complete the mission with the least amount of resources. And they've taken that, and we literally do that. Myself and the other new player look at the forces that are put up against us, and then we bid against each other. So we're taking lore aspects of the game, and literally it's been turned into a mechanic within the scenarios we're playing. And there's competition between us, because whoever wins the bid gets to deploy his forces and win glory for his clan. And whoever doesn't win then has to play as the defender. And it's like, you don't know what forces you're going to be playing with then. But I really enjoy that, because it's not just I'm bringing my army, you're bringing your army, we're going to butt heads. There's no long-term repercussions, we'll wrap it up or whatever. It's a narrative style. There's a storyline we're following, where the guys are picking battles that happen in the lore. And it's like, well, traditionally this force was there, so that's the force that's brought in. So it's playing on quite a few things that I like. You know what I mean? It's playing on some interesting points that I really enjoy. But for me, just showing up and playing one-off games, they have a time and a place, but it's not what I'm looking for at this moment in time. So I'm more into what would be narrative, but I know what's defined as narrative, there's a wide kind of spectrum.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I would go first with my comment. Is I prefer what many would consider to be narrative, in the sense that you if you can set up a story or a scenario that makes you really kind of imagine this going on in a way that even when you lose after you try, you kind of enjoyed it because you just got to see it unfold. It's really a lot of fun. Like, you can really get vested in the game even when you lose. And I've had that happen with everything from like Star Wars Armada to like I can go in Star Wars Armada and get toasted, but I just like saw so many ships getting blown up and like crazy stuff that like I'm imagining on screen happen that I just loved it even though I lost. However, with the sort of skirmish and the board games and role-playing games and miniature tabletop war games starting to have like this coexistence, you know, where they're all kind of, in some ways, the lines getting blurred to varying degrees. I asked myself, you know, for some folks, narrative is like having like a miniature like war party like come through, and then like once they get to a certain point, like this guy goes like, so do you know where the gas depot is? Because I need to find that. And, you know, and it's actually like role playing, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you can get to a point where and if you're a role player, you know, like you might like that more, you know, there may be elements of interaction and storylines. And that's where I kind of thought, can it also be a slippery slope for miniature tabletop wargaming? Now, based on Rusty's previous answer, the answer is yes. but my thought is like where it's a story being developed in scenarios, if you know, from like a typical miniature wargamer perspective, I think where the word usage is, I think it's a good thing, you know, in that it just adds more interest and adds more than just competition and trying to just beat the other player, you know, which also can be a good thing too. Like, you know, just the whole aspect of just playing a game and trying to make strategies work. I mean, some people like that, and that's part of it. But yeah, so I guess it's based on that definition as to how far you take it and at what point. Like I have the AD&D battle systems, so it, as I understand it, was created to handle mass battles within the role-playing game universe where the role-playing game really couldn't handle it from like an actual game perspective. Like you could always, I suppose, say that this battle happened and just say what happened, like, you know, but if you really wanted to play it out, they made this miniature game to do that. But I don't think the miniature game in any way like really is heavily role-playing game influenced. I mean, it is a tabletop miniature game, you know, and so it's not like they're basically using it so you don't have to role play it. You know, like they're using it to handle the mass battle, and then you go back to the RPG with the results of like what happened. And so it's interesting.
I'd say the one thing you can do is like I like to, like I said, design my own army or force to be able to play. But you can turn around and say, all right, you have this, you got this. It's like you got your points values. You design the army the way you want. But when you get to the table, you can throw a narrative aspect in it. It's like, all right, there's objectives. All right, you have to go do this or take that. Or maybe part of your force can come on in turn one, part of it can come on turn two, you know, spread it out. Like you're marching in column or something of that nature to, you know, alleviate some things.
But I think that sort of ties into where my mind wanders.
That's a first. One of my cats broke in during the show. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I noticed. I was waiting for a tripod or something to be knocked over there. I'm like, wait for it.
I thought I heard something. I was like, that must be somebody else.
But like my mind is wandering as we're talking about narrative and in regards to wargaming. Straight away, I go into campaign play. Like I'm interested in the narrative that is, you know, the story that sort of unfolds when you're playing a series of games where, you know, throwing your forces, you know, to the wind in a once-off game doesn't matter that much. But the narrative, I suppose, you know, it's like it's a lot of catch-all that goes into narrative. But in my mind, when we talk about narrative, there'll be specific scenarios. I'm raiding your depot. I'm assaulting, you have your defenses built up or whatever, you know, that's sort of that storyline to it. But the knock-on effects, like Pyrrhic victories, when I used to play Battlefleet Gothic, this is what I really liked about the game. You know, just throwing your forces to the, you know, hell for leather wasn't always the best option. I really like games where you have to resource manage your forces. You have to nurse them for the final assault You know what I mean? You have to know when to sort of cut your losses, and the various scenarios that you'll be playing. It's like, okay, well, I won this battle. That means I have a strategic control over this area. Next, that then dictates that the next mission we're going to play, I'm going to raid your transport convoys. That will prevent you from doing a planetary assault on one of my key planets. That's sort of, when we're talking about narrative play, that's where my mind goes into. And I think campaign play is sort of, maybe it's linked in or it's a subgenre in that Venn diagram of what narrative play is. But there's a lot of what narrative play is.
That's exactly how I'd like to. It's like if I'm looking at BattleTech. So when I prefer to play BattleTech as a campaign, because then you're not just throwing everything up against something, and if it dies, no big deal. It's like the pickup games type of thing. If you're playing a campaign, or if your campaign is like, if you're mercenaries, or if your company is like, every asset is important and it's not expendable. It's like you're going to play to a point. It's like, oh, this guy just took a bunch of damage. I'm pulling them out. It's like I don't want him to get destroyed because it costs too much to replace something and it is to fix it, right? So that's the whole important thing. Was like when you're playing campaign, is that's like a narrative aspect of it, but it's not really narrative. It's just a mechanic that allows the individual not to go full in and totally get everything destroyed. It's like, it's no big deal. It's like, well, they'll get replaced the next time. When you're playing campaign, that isn't the case.
Right. There's a cost.
Yeah.
I was just going to.
Sorry, just like it not being narrative. Like if you were doing a historical battle, and it's like there's a series of battles that happened because there was a skirmish here, these were the results, there was another skirmish here, and then it led up to a main battle. That's kind of how I see the campaign play, where it just sort of unfolds the potentials of what it could be, and the story that it that weaves in and of itself. Maybe, I don't know, my definition of narrative is slightly different to you guys. What do you think, Palmer?
Well, I think there can be, and even like we'll go through the comments here, but I have the suspicion that for every type of game there is, to every level of integration, there's different definition of narrative, like, in the sense of how you use that. And so I think, there is certain aspects where you get more of what we might describe as a narrative feel with the campaign, because one, you may get attached to characters you never expected to become good. You lose characters that you put a lot of points in that just piss you off, like when they die. And then like all these things happen. And then over time, like this story kind of develops over the course of a series of games, even without having to pull them out like puppets and talk. Like you still kind of have this story that develops, and some people call that narrative. And then there could be something maybe even more detailed, like you're describing it, at least the way I interpret it, Dwayne, where you might have like a very strict set of rules that like all these different kind of scenarios and situations come up that then affect how things are going within it, and you just feel much more immersed given the way you're playing the game as well. And so I think like, yeah, I mean, I think everybody's going to have a different sort of perspective on it. As an aside, when you had said the comment earlier, like, if you do this and this, then you'll affect all my planets. I kind of thought, imagine somebody just showed up in the channel and like saw Dwayne going like, if you do this and this, like then my planets, like, what is this that I want?
I am the Grand Warlord. It's the mask has slipped a little,
Got my tinfoil hat here.
It's like when I hear narrative play, to me that means that, all right, the scenario's been all set up and you got no control over everything, and you just walk in and start throwing dice. To me, that's what I consider narrative play versus campaign.
Yeah, but that ties into campaign for me though, because when I'm like, my experience of playing campaigns is, I know we go to BattleTech a lot, but there'll be like a GM, and he sets up the contracts, and he decides what the plays are going to be. And I get a choice. So when I was playing with my friend, it's like he'll do 2 contracts, and he'll be like, you can go here or here. So he set up what the contracts are. He set up the forces. You know what I mean? So there is that
kind of like Barter Town.
Yeah. It's
2 men enter.
Embargo.
well, this is it.
Embargo
No, but-
on.
That makes sense. That makes sense, Dwayne. I think what you're kind of, to me, what you guys are both kind of illustrating is that there's just like lots of different ways interesting ways to set up tabletop games versus just you, like your versus all like 2,000 points versus my 2,000 points, and just whose ever list is more powerful this week. What do you guys think? Should we just hit the comments real quick here?
Yeah.
No, far away.
Addicted to Lead says, I know I'm burned out on the local competitive bolt action, and I'm sticking to less competitive games or solo/co-op. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's rejuvenation and playing differently at times. That's my take on it. Dan says, a narrative game requires the two participants cooperate to create a rewarding experience. Does it have to be two people for it to be narrative? We'll go back to that. It can be tons of fun, but does not work for people with really competitive mindsets, in my experience. I would agree. Yeah, like some folks just don't enjoy it unless it's feeding their sort of competitive nature. And that's kind of why they're choosing to do it.
I don't know. I think you can flip it, especially with one-sided scenarios. I know competitive people can find like one-sided scenarios hard, but then it's like, right, we're going to run through this. How many Zulus can I fend off at Rourke's Drift? All right, this many. Then we'll flip the scenario. You do the same. The winner is whoever held out the longest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really prescribe to, like, especially competitive people, you know, giving out about, you know, things being one-sided. It's like, that's fine. We'll play the scenario twice. We'll flip through it and see who's better if you want to be
highly competitive. Is being a competitive person myself. You put me in a scenario where I'm down and I have to really think hard. That is actually can be rewarding in a game where you're up against the wall, so you have to work even harder to try to win. Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect of it too.
I think what Dan was trying to illustrate, you know, is just with the normal two players in a game, like that's what he meant. I'm sure he'd probably agree that it could be narrative, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but just knowing Dan, I'm sure he'd probably agree that you can solo game and it be narrative, because I actually think solo gaming can ultimately be very narrative, because when you don't have anybody else there, you have to make it as interesting as possible, you know.
I know exactly what that's like, because I've been spending the last month playing a board game against myself and trying to win. I just can't get it done.
Yeah. So he also says, I am more interested in the story that the game tells than winning and losing. And I'm totally with him there on that. Because most of the games that I replay, I like so much because I get immersed in them. You know, like, and as like some of the best games are the ones that I've lost and just walk away, just really having had a lot of fun.
I'll say Dan and I have had some good games so far playing against each other, and we did have a really good one fighting over a Cabbage Patch. So
that wasn't like a collectible doll; it was an actual Cabbage Patch, right?
It was an actual Cabbage Patch.
It wasn't like who gets to name it.
We're fighting over the sauerkraut.
He says it could be a lot like role playing, really.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. Like, narrative is a very broad church of style of play. There's no sort of cut and dry with it, and I think that's why, like, I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle from what others would as well. You know what I mean? It's you know, it's a broad church of what narrative play is.
Brad says narrative play is fun in a campaign, as well as playing co-op games and solo. I would agree. And I think folks have already said hello, but hello, Gary. Thanks for joining us. Gary, Wargaming with Gary is in the house.
Morning, Gary.
Rusty says morning. Hi, Gary. All right. Solo gaming is great for narrative play for sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. I often mention this, but like one day when I do like actually crack my 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy rules, like, and actually do something with it, it's likely first going to be just a table that I set aside and just simulate a small actions battle, like, you know, maybe some high elves fighting some beastmen or something like that. Just playing some real grindy old school rules and seeing how over time like the turns develop and play it maybe over a month, like just kind of like Rusty's doing with his Hex game there, just doing something like that. And I'm sure that it'll feel very narrative when you do that.
Yeah. I've been thinking about doing if I can't get enough BattleTech in, just actually playing against myself and see what happens. If I can win.
And just out of curiosity, has anybody checked? I'm sure that actually maybe one of you guys know this, but does that game, which will not be mentioned, have a tabletop simulator game? Actually, you have the video game. I know it has an amazing video game, but does it have?
There are various ways to play that which shall not be named, but starts with a B.
Rusty's like, forget it.
There's a Mega Mech version, which is a fan-made Flash game, which is a direct port of the game. There's Tabletop Simulator. I've literally run games of BattleTech on Tabletop Simulator for people. You can get the assets. Like Tabletop Simulator is a great software. Like it's so flexible in regards to what you want to play on it. There's quite a lot you can.
Does it have a hex board as a hex board for the BattleTech?
Yeah. No,
I would think so. Yeah,
they're literally just assets that people create and you download and import into your game. Mm-hmm. It's the same with cards, the dice, miniatures. They're just assets that you download and put into your game. So, you can play any board game. If anyone's created the assets for it, you can play any board game on Tabletop Simulator, mm-hmm. or any war game, anything. Yeah. If you want to play Saga, or someone's created the assets for what you need to play Saga, fire away. Like,
yep, no, and they have for sure. Yeah, it's that is cool.
I just typed it into my search engine here, so now I need to go actually look at it on Steam.
Because yeah, I mean, like you could be playing against Dwayne BattleTech.
Oh yeah,
you could just write on Tabletop Simulator.
I can get the mix together. I have a table ready. Like literally, I can play BattleTech against anyone on Tabletop Sim if they want.
Or, Rusty, you can just play the game by yourself.
But actually, I to do that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like honestly, I'm not just saying that as a joke. In all honesty, even with Tabletop Simulator, I'm planning on solo wargaming stuff because I think it's a different feel altogether.
Yeah.
Like one is not actually a substitute for having to do the other. It's like just a totally different niche experience.
It's another tool in the toolbox. You know what I mean? It's not a replacement for the tabletop war game. It doesn't quite fulfill that role, mm-hmm. but it has done a great job of being a stopgap for me because of the social distancing and we can't play in person. It's been a nice substitute, but ultimately for me, it doesn't replace playing in person. It just doesn't.
You know what I think it's kind of like? I've I'll reveal this, but Rusty knows this, but I have a number of COVID hobbies that I've picked up, and COVID interests, and one of them is I've kind of gotten into F1 racing in the last year, and I watched the racers, the drivers, and they play the simulations, right? Like they actually, when they're not driving like real, like in their cars, like many of them will use the simulators. I guess I'm freezing there for a second, I think. But
no, you're grand.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So, like if they can appreciate like the real driving at whatever 100 and something miles per hour in a real F1 engine with it basically on a wing, but then resort to a simulator just to sort of work on their skills like during downtime or whatever when they're not in the car. I think sometimes Tabletop Simulator is cool because when you can't get a game, if you just want to work the rules and actually like want another player to work the rules, you can flex the rules and kind of continue to work them, not get rusty, and actually use it for that purpose. But it doesn't take away, it doesn't actually remove the need for that experience of the tabletop. That nobody, I think, that's a tabletop gamer would choose it over that. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a value, in the sense of being able to still get a game in and use the rule set when you can. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, definitely. When you're thinking about all the different like you brought up racers, the tracks are the exact track, so they can actually feel like they acquaint themselves with, I'm coming up on this corner, I need to do this at this corner, and they're anticipating what they're going to do. Now, that doesn't bring the G force into it or the actual revving of the engine, what gear I got to feel that gear. But it gives them a step up and beyond. It's like if you're playing a tabletop simulator, even solo playing against yourself, you're trying to keep some of those skills active that you may not be able to do when you're face to face with somebody. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, you can use it as practice to formulate tactics. If you know what forces you're going to be playing, right? If he deploys here, I can run through this scenario and play it out. If he deploys here, I can run through that scenario and play it out, or vary the forces. So you can use it for, tactical play as well, or maybe you just don't have the space at home to set up a game and leave it set up as well.
Yeah.
It could really play into your hand well that way as well. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Especially if you've got pets or kids or whatever, or you just don't physically have the space, you can leave that virtual space saved and get back to it, and away you go.
Exactly. So you could also be able to set up a campaign and play it through kind of quickly, just to give yourself an idea how much more space I may need, or how I may have to tweak the defenses, versus, okay, the defenses kind of work this way. I know that they're going to bring this much battle value into the games, but I'm not sure exactly what my game I'm setting up is going to be working against, because you never know exactly what they're going to bring, but you could always set it up to give yourself a good idea. And you may say, okay, I just made the defenses a little too killy that it's going to kill the fun, so I may have to downgrade this a little bit, type of deal. So I can see that happening. So I've done that too. We're going through it and wargaming it myself. But there's some things that I have to say is years of experience playing the game. There's certain, like I say, let's bring BattleTech into it, where there's certain mechs I just look at, it's like, I know exactly how they're going to operate, I'm going to use them, or someone may use them against me. But there are newer ones I've never faced. I'm like, I'm not really sure exactly how that thing's going to work. And so I could see myself using that to kind of war game.
I mean, Rusty, you've played BattleTech so long that you know the different kinds of upholstery and the interior of all those different mechs. I mean, like, if you were to pilot one, what kind of Fenrisian leather is in, like, some of those mechs, right?
Yeah, maybe. There's certain things that I'm on autopilot when it comes to with certain mechs. Now, if you're doing Succession Wars, Starleague Succession Wars, and 3050 to maybe 3055, you take all that stuff. I was like, I'm on autopilot. But when you start getting into the newer era stuff, there's like, you look at the 3045 or something like that, I think it is. I have no clue. I've never even seen it on the board, but there are mechs for it. I don't know. It's kind of scary. It was like when you go, it's like there's one time I went to Gen Con and they brought out all the new stuff, and it was like stealth armor and all this. The first time I've ever seen it, and like looking at it going, oh my God, what the heck I'm looking at my sheet going, I have no idea how this stuff works. I got to break the rule book out. Oh, this is not in this rule book. What rule book is this in?
Yeah, but that reflects like real warfare, where new units, new tactics, how to react to them, adapt, and develop your own tactics to counter. You know what I mean? So it plays into that aspect of it as well.
There's two aspects of it. I didn't know how to use it properly. So the guys that knew how to use it properly or fight against it, they had an advantage against me. and that aspect of it. So I was like leaning heavily. It's like, all right, well, who knows how this stuff works? Exactly how am I supposed to use this? Fill me in quickly before this game gets started.
Rusty's like, and that's the aspect that's unacceptable. You know, one of the things,
it's a true challenge, though. You know,
well, one of the things that I think is cool about BattleTech is that they almost have that historical component where if you really like Innersphere, like the first mechs that came out, you can just simply say, we're going to play this era, you know, and then you don't have to worry about everything you just said. In the same way, you don't have to worry about it in modern versus World War II warfare. Like, you know, like you can basically say, even in World War II, you can say, we're going to play early war, you know, and then you get to use those kind of cool tanks that you like, and not have to worry about the late war stuff coming in, you know, like, and worrying about that kind of imbalance issues or whatever. You just play it to that, and you can do that in BattleTech, and it's a fictional game, which I think that's kind of very interesting, that like that they have it laid out that way, you know, where, you know, it's not just like in 40K and some of these other games where like the whole game moves. Like, you know, there is no, unless you're like us, where you just basically like literally hold on to the old rule books and say, we're going to go back in time and like play as if we were in 1993, you know, which is weird. Like, you know, we do it, but it's weird.
It's against the grain. It's not facilitated though. Sorry,
it's very weird. It's weird to do it, but people do it because of the need to do it. And like, I'm one of them. Like, I'm, you know, people do it, but with this, it's designed to actually play at different eras, and so it's acceptable. It's totally normal, like, to do that, which I think is cool.
Yeah, there's nothing on. It's like our current campaign that we're playing at BattleTech with my brothers and friends. We started in the Succession Wars like 30-25, and now it's 30-68. So we're now getting into all this new tech stuff, the really new tech stuff. We're starting to see it on the battlefield, and you're like, we're finally actually playing games where this is getting us into it. And we plan on just keep going until 30-31 or 31 era, somewhere in there. And so it could be 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road before we actually finish the campaign. But we're progressing it along. We're actually wanting to actually play with the new toys that are available. Because for years, it's always been Succession Wars up to Clan Invasion, and then we stop. It's always been the cycle. It's like, we reached 30-55. Oh, we're done. Start over. Reset.
I think it ties into what Palmer's saying. Like, it's one of the aspects I like about it, where, you know, the equivalent would be starting off with a Royal Tank Regiment of the British Army and starting early war, fighting all the way through France and retreating through Dunkirk, and then, you know, playing through the desert campaign and then up into D-Day. You know what I mean? It's kind of unique in that regard that I know of. That you can do that where it's not a historical game, but it kind of plays like one if you want it to be. I really like that aspect of it. And you can you can then decide, you know, in and of yourself. I like that in a war game, the technology level and how advanced you want things to be. Like, for me, when I'm looking at bolt action, I'm like, I don't play bolt action. I'm not 100%, you know, invested in the idea, but I can see myself dabbling, and I'm like, right, if I was to collect bolt action, what theater of war would I want to play in? And I've always really liked the African campaign, Rommel against the British, because in my eyes, I think what attracts me to it would be like, it's probably the only time that both forces, there was a lot of to-ing and froing, being even-footed, sort of. So it's, you know, being tied into it. I'm gone off on a tangent, but, you know, it's been able to sort of pick an era and why you like that era, you know.
If you wanted to play 1940 France, you can do that. You could play Poland if you wanted to. You know, there's many different ways of playing that game. Or if you just want to play Normandy, you know, go that route. Or just Russia. And the last game is like Dan and I, Boomin and I played that bolt action game. It was a really good one. It was basically France, Normandy, but it's a game that can be immersive if you want to. And I like a game where you can go, like you were saying, it's like you can have it like either like BattleTech, where you could have a progressive campaign where you're going through different eras, or you can just take a snapshot and just play in that era alone and constantly. Now, we've been playing a lot of Flames of War in our group, and we had been playing nothing but the North African campaign. Even we played Battle Group, which has always been North Africa. But now just lately, it's like, maybe we want to play Russia, the Russian invasion, like after Barbarossa, 1941, 42 era. That's what we're kind of started dabbling in right now. But
you could apply these things to fantasy, though. You know what I
yes.
mean? If you design the fantasy setting where you're like, okay, there's bows are only available here, and then the technology base changes a bit where there's crossbows, and then after a certain period, gunpowder is introduced where it's primitive. So you could do like early, mid, and late sort of technology levels in a fantasy setting if you wanted to, and it could be sort of grounded more historically, or you could just go like, and introduce magic as well. There's a lot of potential if you wanted to. But that ties back into, are you going to make your own rules? Is that part of the wargaming culture that you're raised up in or brought up in?
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, if you actually go into some of even the Warhammer fantasy players that are getting back into the old world movement, of like this new game that's coming out, many of them were so steeped into the narrative that they'll talk about like different time periods, and when it's set, like what time period is this going to be set in, like for like Warhammer Fantasy, and like really get into it. Like if you look at also like with AD&D or D&D, like there are folks that are into the different things like Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms and like all the different times and campaign settings and time periods and stuff. And even in fantasy, people can go crazy with it, and it's like you said, like it's, what is this world like? And, what are these people like that settled in this forest and, and all this stuff. And they just get to that level of granularity.
What time period are we playing? Are we playing War of the Beards, where it's like, the elves versus the dwarves and these, fortresses are still here? Or are we playing before the island of Albion comes out of the sea? You know what I mean? There's a lot, there's a lot of potential.
You can really go into it, like now you could play Lord of the Rings, go that route. Are we talking before the fall or after, the second age, first age, third age? Sky's the limit there too.
Absolutely. And I was kind of thinking, when I do my battle systems, I was toying with the idea of doing it and incorporating either Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, and like just using it as an opportunity to read up on some of that stuff, as part of it. Cause it's just fun, like it's like what we talked about with the narrative, and you don't need it to play the game at all. But if you actually want to set up some scenarios and look into the background and match it up a bit, it's just kind of fun. I think that's why people do a lot of this stuff.
Now, this may sound interesting, but the one game that we designed, it's the modern one. It was designed to be more of a narrative game. You set up the scenarios, you play the battles. It's like, this is a set piece battle, went that route. We did have a scenario generator in it, so you could build it. It's like, roll a couple die, and you say, oh, this guy's going to have this attack, this defense, and then how many points of stuff that's going to be thrown into the mix. But it was kind of a narrative style system that we made up, but comparatively, and it just, I think that when it comes down to games, are they narrative or are they point driven? A lot of point driven games are designed to be tournament style games versus, or is it just a game for picking up and having fun with? And designing a scenario to play. That's the difference, how it's gone with that route. It's like you look at like bolt action. It's like I know Dan's going to be playing a tournament here in 2 weeks, but that game can be a very narrative-driven style of game. I think it's more designed to be narrative of a system. There's points involved, but I think it's more narrative. And I think when you read the rules, it's like I think that's how it comes across as me. And then you look at like Flames of War. To me, Flames of War is a tournament-style game system, and you look at that route.
That makes sense. Well, I don't think we have too many more comments. I think I've got one here from Dan, but I think we're kind of getting to a close as far as our usual time for the show. Dan says, I love bolt action, just kind of pairing off of what Rusty said. It also takes a very small investment to get in, and any manufacturer's minis are welcome. Wonderful game with tons of narrative possibilities.
Yep,
I've been
I
looking
agree.
at various manufacturers for different vehicles in 156 scale. And I was wondering that whether people would be like, oh, it's not a bolt action miniature. You know what I mean? So that's cool to me that you can get that it's sort of accepted various manufacturers within that specific gaming culture.
It's like you look at my my Russian forces. I think I have like 3 different manufacturers maybe 4 manufacturers of Russian miniatures. For my Russians. So it's like. It doesn't matter. It's just it represents a soldier. It's a soldier. It doesn't. I don't really care too much who produced it. It's just I'm going to be able to use it.
Exactly. As long as it's roughly the same size, roughly comparatively speaking, it should be fine, right?
And in some ways, I don't mind a miniature being slightly out of scale with another because you look at humans. It's like you could have somebody that's 5'2" versus somebody that's 6 foot. They're got to scale with each other.
True. And in fantasy, it's like dwarves, elves, humans, right?
Yep, exactly. Or half elves. You never hear about half dwarves.
That's true. I don't think anybody with dwarf in their blood would admit that it's not dwarf.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to know what's going on there.
I'm just a big
know when you're talking about scale and games, I'm just envisioning like a Tiger tank that's like a clown car with 4 or 5 Germans coming out of it, but they physically wouldn't fit type of thing. And then there's another one that's probably in scale. That'd be hilarious. The main Toon tanks come to mind.
Yeah.
They're hilarious.
I think Tillet says cheap to get into until you start researching the Battle of Carrington and collect 2 full companies of German and American airborne, or so I've heard.
That's one thing I've been wanting to do is build an American airborne company. So for my bolt action, I do have the miniatures to build a bolt action British airborne, but I haven't put them together yet. So
because they're multi-part metal models.
No, they're actually plastic.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that if somebody twists my arm really hard, I might actually do it. But
I have to say, if I did get into it,
well, gentlemen and everyone,
British, American, or British, Germans, and Italians. But yeah, I think it. Fire away, Palmer. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, I think we are getting towards our normal closing point, a little past it. But I think we've had some great discussion on these topics tonight.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun and a lot of, as usual, but a lot of good sidetracks. At certain points, you wonder whether we actually were on the same topic anymore. But it actually was kind of good tangents that led into other discussions.
Well, they're related to the topic, so it's just something that's going to progress that way one way or the other. So
yeah. Absolutely. And we are coming to a close to the season. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the next show should be in 2 weeks on Rusty's channel. We'll have more info coming out. But there will be some, I think, probably more invites going out to folks that have been on the channel or on the show this year. anybody that's watching that's been on the show. It's going to be kind of like a first come first serve because we are limited with StreamYard as to how many people that can come on, but we do really look forward to people joining us for the season finale before the summer, which just like normal, just kind of like modeled after a television show, we do take a break during the summer. I personally usually take a hobby break actually and do other stuff for a little bit, and then usually I'm like screaming to get back to it. It's usually very invigorating, but we usually take a bit of time off from the show as well.
It's understandable. I'm looking to get into fishing myself, to be honest with you.
We've got one more comment from Dan before we come out or leave, and we'll be done.
Always enjoyable chat, guys. Any topics related to gaming is fun to listen. Is a fun listen. Take care, all. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And
good night, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hopefully on the season finale show. Take care, everyone.
Night.
Good night.